Hey, this is Gavin Gaddis in for Tom Webster for Sounds Profitable on today, Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026, the Podcast Atlas, Part 4, The Denominator. Winning on quality is only half the story when the audience you want is already spending its day somewhere else. The following is in first person from Tom, so let's get into it. Every argument in this series so far has been an argument about rates. Audio wins on trust per impression. Creator-integrated video ads win on receptivity per exposure. Clips win on conversion per discovery. Rates are numerator arguments, and podcasting wins nearly all of them. Social platforms win almost none, and it doesn't matter because social isn't competing on the numerator. Social is the denominator. I've written before that these platforms are rented land, and that's still true. It's also where the people are, and no amount of numerator superiority changes the math when the other side of the fraction is this large. Here are 5 things the data says about it. 1. The reach gap is not close. YouTube reaches 82% of podcast listeners in a month. Facebook reaches 80%. Audio podcasts, the entire medium this trade is built on, reach 36%. That's the denominator argument in a single chart. The 2 biggest social platforms each reach more than twice as many podcast listeners as podcasting itself does through audio. But reach and habit are 2 different assets, and the chart shows both. Facebook converts 88% of its monthly users into daily users, and the strongest return rate measured. YouTube's daily figure is 78%, still enormous, but its distinguishing asset is the footprint. TikTok is the interesting middle case, half the monthly reach of the giants, but 79% of its users come back daily, which is habit strength approaching Facebook's on a smaller base. One kind of platform gets you nearly everybody occasionally. The other gets you the same people relentlessly, and an advertiser who treats those as interchangeable inventory ends up over-frequencied on one and undercovered on the other. Number 2. Social platforms are podcast platforms now. The 64% of podcast listeners who always or often consume podcast content on YouTube is the number everybody expects. The number nobody expects is right below it. 37% consume podcast content on Facebook, more than on Spotify, 28%, or Apple Podcasts, 18%. Instagram Reels at 30% also beats both dedicated audio apps. The purpose-built podcast apps have been outdistanced as podcast surfaces by platforms that never set out to be one, and for a large part of the audience, YouTube isn't an alternative to the podcast, it is the podcast. Number 3, the biggest room has the worst ad experience. The platform carrying the most podcast consumption also carries the study's worst ad environment sentiment. 61% of YouTube users say the platform has too many ads, and 49% of YouTube Primes, the people who use it most and like it the best, actively disagree that its ads are non-disruptive. Note that this refers to all of YouTube as a whole, distinct from what are perceived to be video podcasts on YouTube. YouTube lands at the bottom of the non-disruption ranking at 32, below Facebook, below Threads, below everything measured. And that score comes from its own primes, which removes the easy explanation that the complaint comes from people who don't want to be there. The interruption model is doing the damage, not the creative. An ad that arrives by stopping something the viewer chose starts every impression from behind, and no amount of targeting precision fixes that. Buying YouTube for the denominator is sound. Buying it for the quality of the ad moment is not. Number 4, action and belief are different jobs. TikTok posts the lowest none of the above of any platform measured, 21%, and the highest immediate purchase rate, 22%. When a campaign has something to convert and a short path from seeing to buying is the point, this is the surface built for it, though some of that is affordance rather than persuasion, because a platform built end-to-end for immediate response will always show better action numbers than one where acting requires leaving. Now look at the column, which you can find in the newsletter version of today's issue. Now look at the column the podcast industry would rather skip. Audio's none of the above is 37%, tied with Facebook for the highest in the chart, and that's immediate purchase rate of 10%, the lowest. If you stopped reading there, you'd conclude podcast ads underperform, but this series has spent 3 weeks establishing what audio actually wins: attention, trust, and the willingness to believe what a host says. Those don't show up in the same session action metric, and they were never going to. Action and belief are different jobs, measured on different clocks, and a media plan that grades every channel on the immediate action column will systematically underbuy the channels doing the persuasion. Number 5, Facebook is a frequency instrument, not a first touch one. Facebook arrives with the strongest daily habit in the study, and 66% of podcast listeners name it a most used platform. It also arrives with the weakest credibility profile measured. Among its own primes, only 36% credit its content with factual accuracy. Only 31% say they've never been misled there, and 40% believe its creators are in it primarily for the money. A platform people return to every day is close to unbeatable for frequency, retargeting, and community maintenance. A platform whose ads people don't fully believe is a poor place to make the first argument for a brand nobody knows yet. Put the persuasion where it works and let Facebook do the reminding, and the buy holds up. Ask it to carry the introduction, and you're spending mass reach money on the message least likely to be believed. The smaller territories sort quickly. Instagram, 62% monthly reach, 55% ad relevance among its primes, works as a mid-funnel reinforcement. X still moves around live moments. 48% of its users consume clips there always or often, though that's an audience observation, not a recommendation, since we don't publish there ourselves. Reddit and Threads aren't meaningful ad surfaces for this purpose today. Twitch shows the strongest creator trust signals of the small platforms, with 65% of its users crediting creator transparency, though at a small base, that's a signal, not a finding. About those ad load numbers. The ad load numbers are the ones most likely to get quoted out of this piece, and they're the ones I'd handle most carefully. People complain about ads on the platforms they use the most, so some of YouTube's 61% is a function of exposure volume rather than a verdict on the advertising itself. Watch anything for enough hours, and you accumulate grievances about the interruptions. A platform with 1/10 of the usage would post a friendlier score without earning it. That doesn't erase the finding. Half of the platform's most engaged users actively disagreed that its ads stay out of the way is a real cost, however it got there. It just narrows the claim. YouTube ads work at a discount, and the discount is the price of the interruption model. So the plan writes itself as a fraction. Social suppliers, the denominator, the 82% reach, the 88% daily return, the retargeting pools, and nothing in the podcast territories can substitute for it. Podcasting supplies the numerator, the attention, the credibility, the host a listener chose to believe, and nothing on rented land can substitute for that either. The industry has spent years asking whether these platforms are podcasting's competitors or its distribution. The data suggests they're neither, exactly. They're the other half of the math, and the more interesting question is why so many media plans still get built as if one side of the fraction could do the other side's job. For more, please download the podcast atlas linked in today's show notes, where you can also watch the webinar where Tom walks you through all of the territories on the podcast map. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful research partner, SiriusXM Podcast Network, ESPN Podcasts, BetterHelp, NPR, and American Public Media, as well as our research partners at Signal Hill Insights. Next week, a newsletter about newsletters. Thanks for listening to Tom's article, The Podcast Atlas, Part 4, The Denominator. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis, and we'll see you next week for another narrated article.